It's one of the defining films of the Western genre, despite being a remake of a Japanese film. It's been the subject of numerous TV sequels, remakes, and parodies. It's the magnificent 1, 2, 3, 4, 7. In 1954, legendary Japanese director Akira Kurosawa made a seminal film about a band of samurai hired to defend a helpless village from marauders, the Seven Samurai. Actor Yul Brynner, at that time best known for his star-making turn in both the Broadway and film versions of The King and I, suggested the idea of a remake to producer Walter Mirisch, who eventually made a deal with Toho Studios to mount a Hollywood version of The Seven Samurai, recast as a western. Tapped to direct the picture was another legendary director, John Sturges. The basic story is much the same as the Japanese original, just transplanted to the Wild West. A poor Mexican village is being harassed by Calvera and his bandits. Since the story takes place 100 years before the A-Team, the locals look for hired guns to scare off Calvera. They find some, approximately 6.5 of them, but rounding up makes 7. The Magnificent Seven take on Calvera, lose to Calvera, then finally decide, fuck it, let's defeat him anyway. The end. It's not a complicated plot, because that's not what this film is about. It's about manliness, and what that meant in 1960. It's a film about being a man's man, or a man's man's man, or a lady's man who wants to be a man's man. The Seven are presented as mercenaries with hearts of gold. Yeah, they could earn more money on other jobs like teachers, but here they can use their guns to do good, like teachers. Most of the Seven seem really down on their prospects as hired killers. The market for contract death is in the toilet right now. Film stars Yul Brynner as Chris. Brynner's Chris is sanguine, a little more accepting of his station in life than the others, despite a weariness to him. Brynner was a man's man.
The graveyard's full of boys who are very young and very proud.
Steve McQueen as Vin was even more of a man's man. A man's. In fact, he's a little more realistic about his place in the world and starting to realise the downside to being a killer. McQueen at the time was a TV star, and he staged an accident so he could claim he was unable to work on his series while he convalesced. Guess when he worked on this film? McQueen and Brynner, each being men's, whatever, were competitive with each other, which didn't make for an easy time on set.
Reminds me of that fellow back home that fell off a 10-story building. As he was falling, people on each floor kept hearing him say, "So far, so good."
Next we have James Coburn as the Knife Man, Knives McThrowy Blade. Sorry, that should read Brit. He can throw a knife accurately without using aimbots and shoot better than anyone else.
Bullshit. 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 Bullshit.
German actor Horst Buchholz plays Chico, the young Mexican who wants so much to prove himself to Chris and Vin, embarrassing himself in the same way our engineer Frank did at his sister's wedding.
Told you.
Never mind. Robert Vaughn is the suave killer Lee, and despite his reputation seems to be having a tough time making ends meet. Vaughn's character also seems to be suffering from what we'd now call PTSD, but this being 1960 and set in the 1800s is dismissed as a bad dream. Or is it shell shock or cowardice? Either way, being perceived as a man is all he needs to do the right thing, which is to shoot his guns at the bad guys. Brad Dexter is a straight-up loon. Despite being told the job pays $20, he's convinced that there's an angle, a nearby mine, or some Aztec treasure. Despite being told time and time again that he's defending a poor village for less than gas money, he clings to the notion, even up until death, that there's a huge payday. What a fool. He should just use my lotto system that I've been using for the last 25 years. I can't lose. My numbers just have to come up soon. I can just feel it.
Think of the odds.
Lastly, there's Charles Bronson as Bernardo. Bronson doesn't go for the man's man thing as much as the others, but he's always quietly the toughest guy in any ensemble without having to try. Later known for his revenge fantasy movies Death Wish, Bronson is yet another talented gunman who takes a poorly paying gig because gunslinging has about as much future as being James Dean's stunt double. It's also an interesting film if you want to look at race. An early scene shows a town refusing to let a deceased Native American be buried in the local cemetery, and two of our heroes showing that they're above such things. So we see they're really decent types underneath the gunslinger exterior. Of course, this being 1960s Hollywood, At least one and a half of the seven and the main villain were meant to be Mexican, and while the movie was filmed in Mexico, none of the main cast are of Latino extraction for whatever reason.
Gracias.
Nada.
Hey, but at the time, Zorro was played on TV by a Sicilian-American actor who changed his name from Armando Catalano to Guy Williams. Hollywood did all sorts of weird shit back then. This movie has good acting, good direction, beautiful cinematography, but it has just the most amazing score by Elmer Bernstein, including the iconic theme tune. The Magnificent Seven, despite now being considered an iconic film, was originally deemed something of a box office disappointment in the US on its original release. However, it did huge business in Europe and elsewhere and was part of a wider trend, whereby box office returns for westerns were on the decline in the US, but still did very well worldwide. Some smart producers on both sides of the Atlantic realised they could film these much cheaper in Europe, usually in somewhere like Spain, with an imported American TV actor past his prime, and make a cheaper film that was still incredibly profitable. And thus, the spaghetti western was born. 3 such films were in fact official sequels to The Magnificent Seven in the late 60s and early 70s, and then much later there was a TV series in the late 90s which sometime guest starred Robert Vaughn. And then there was a sci-fi version from Roger Corman, 1980's Battle Beyond the Stars, again with Robert Vaughn. Also, there are the comedies that were heavily influenced by The Magnificent Seven, such as The Three Amigos and The Ridiculous Six, and finally, the ultimate parody, 2016's The Magnificent Seven remake. Lastly, the very premise of The Magnificent Seven is the basis of the 80s action series, The A-Team, which, in later years, again had Robert Vaughn as a regular. The Magnificent Seven is an entertaining action western with its heart mostly in the right place, and unlike a great number of films from the 50s and 60s, you probably won't cringe too much while watching a well-made western classic. So if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, leave a comment below, and be sure to check out some of our other videos.